Um, Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Electrify Your Ride, the latest on EVs in our area. This is the second in LPEA's Beneficial Electrification webinar series, so thank you all for being here to join us. I'd like to introduce our panel. You might be able to see their faces on the side there, but they'll pop up as we go. Myself, Emily Misseldine. We also have on the line with us Dan Harms, Dominic May, John Kenny, and Hillary Knox will be facilitating our Q&A at the end. So we will have a question and answer session at the end where you have a chance to ask our experts anything you'd like about electric vehicles. You can do that verbally or written. You can raise your hand to answer a question at the end. You'll also, if you have questions that come up during the presentation, feel free to go into that Q&A box below and put your questions there, and Hillary will make sure that it gets, we'll get through some of the questions there at the end. This is also being recorded, so everyone who is registered will be getting a link to the recording and the slides here in the next day or so. So thank you guys for being here. Buckle up and let's go ahead and get started. So as most of you know, LPEA is a rural electric cooperative, which means we're a not-for-profit organization, which means that all of us who are members, owners here at LPEA have a say in our co-op and who governs us and the direction we go together. Back in 2018, LPEA Board of Directors and leadership set a strategic goal to strive to reduce our carbon footprint by 50% while keeping members' cost of electricity lower than 70% of our cooperative peers. There are a lot of ways to get there, and LPEA is committed to both elements of the strategic goal as we move forward. To that end, you'll hear us and many others in the energy world talking about beneficial electrification, or BE. We kind of use those interchangeably. Beneficial electrification means using electricity as a power source. When doing so, satisfies at least one of the following conditions. Basically, we're looking to save members money, benefits the environment, and fosters a more resilient power grid. We have the opportunity to affect our power sources, and strategic fuel switching can really have an impact on both saving us money and reducing our greenhouse gas emissions as a utility and as a community. Electric vehicles, so how does that fit into beneficial electrification? EVs are a quintessential example of BE and an opportunity for us to electrify our lives. It's a clear and obvious case of fuel switching, right? We're switching from gas to electricity. That's pretty obvious for us to see. And as many EV drivers on the call today can attest, it can really, we'll get into here shortly, can really save money on fuel and operating costs, as well as have a great impact on the environment. The other great thing about electric vehicles that fits into BE is that cars and chargers are smart. They have ability to program schedules, monitor charging, and electricity use. The load shifting potential for smart cars and chargers is incredibly useful for members to save money, and for us as a utility can save us money and to possibly help us guide where our loads are hitting on our grid and when. So EVs really have a lot of potential to support a more resilient power grid and to help us move into the future. We're excited to support the electrification of the transportation sector as much as we can. We really appreciate the opportunity to engage with our members and talk to you all about it today and hopefully more in the future. I'm not going to hit on too many of these, talk too much about this because we're going to get into all of it as we go. But EVs can really help as fun to drive. They can save you money on fuel and maintenance costs. And of course, we have rebates. So as we get started into the rest of our session here, I have a poll question for you guys. So we are going to test this out and see if we can do that. Oops. So you. Sorry for the technical difficulties, guys. Drew, any chance you could help me get that poll going?
Let's see. How about we do this?
All right, thank you guys. Please go ahead and answer the poll. Thanks, Drew.
And Emily is guinea pigging this for us. This is the first time we've tried to do a poll at one of these webinars. We thought it would be kind of a fun way to learn more about you. So thanks for being willing to experiment with us.
Definitely. Thanks, guys, and thanks for bearing with me. Looks like most folks have participated here. So just I see a couple folks are raising their hands. If you do have a question, please go ahead and put that in the chat box. We will get to that later. If you're having issues with the poll, I'm preemptively sorry. It's like Hillary said, it's our first time.
Yeah, and Emily, it doesn't look like we have the chat going on this, so we'll have to just do, just have folks raise their hands.
Great, thanks so much, Drew. Hillary, if you're able to see what they're looking for, that would be great.
Yeah, it looks like the Q&A option didn't get enabled on the webinar. So what I would tell folks is we're going to get to the Q&As at the end. So what I would say is either go ahead and raise your hand if you know you're going to want to ask a question or questions. Another option is if you're shy or you don't have the capability to have audio, you can email me throughout the presentation. My email is hknox@lpea.coop. So that's hknox@lpea.coop. And I'll collect those questions and read them out for everyone to answer at the end. And again, apologies for the Q&A button not being enabled, but it wouldn't be a webinar if we didn't have something go wrong.
Thank you, guys. All right. So it looks like most people have responded. Can you guys see results on there? Awesome. So it sounds like some of us already have EVs, and a lot looks like are planning to buy an EV for your next vehicle or looking at more options of cars coming available. So thank you, guys. With that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to John Kinney.
Yeah, thanks, Emily, and thank you all for joining us here tonight. Yeah, if you want to push that slide one forward. So we'll talk a little bit about the different types of EVs that are out there and then what's available on the market. So at the top here, we've kind of broken down the different types of EVs. And on our top left, we're looking at a BEV or battery electric vehicle. So this is kind of what we all think of when we think of an electric vehicle. It's a battery on board connected to one or more motors that are driving wheels, and we're charging that out of a charger here, out of a wall outlet or a public charger. And then in the middle, a little bit different, but something that sounded like a lot of you actually had already. So PHEVs, that's plug-in hybrid electric vehicle, similar to the battery electric vehicle, except now we've got an internal combustion gasoline or diesel engine on board. And these kind of come in two different varieties. One can have the gasoline engine actually powering the wheels, and another, an extended range, would actually have the gasoline engine recharging the battery. So great mileage on these, kind of a good hybrid model for this. If you don't want to go all electric and you want to have that gasoline engine still as a backup there. And then in our top right, this has been around for a while. Toyota Prius, I think we're all kind of familiar with, is just that hybrid vehicle. And in this case, no plug-in ability, so we can't recharge the battery from a wall outlet or a charger. But what we do have is, in all these cases, is regenerative braking. So when a typical vehicle, we're losing a lot of energy through those brakes when we come to a stop, and that's just turning into heat. But in all three cases here, we've got regenerative braking on our wheels in order to recharge those batteries. So in the case of a hybrid, it's regenerative braking, or in some cases, the gasoline engine is actually recharging the battery on board. But that's kind of the three different models up there. And then, so what's available kind of today on the market? We've broken this down into three categories here. On the left-hand side, you've got kind of the small car category, so sedans, coupes, things like that. And these are all kind of sorted out by MSRP, so the lowest at the top, going all the way down to a pretty big sticker price there for a Tesla Model S Plaid. But I think the important thing to note here is that people, manufacturers like Nissan, Hyundai, Chevy have models out there today that are pretty affordable from what we'll see here with some of the incentives that are available. And then, if you want to get spendy, you can get pretty spendy on the top end there with some of the Teslas or some of the luxury car manufacturers that are starting to come out with models. And then in the middle, we've got our SUVs. So, here in Colorado, I think that's probably a pretty popular spot to be. And this is starting to fill in pretty well. So, you've got things like the Mustang Mach-E or the Volvo XC40 that are kind of that full-size SUV that a lot of people are looking for, and it's out there already. And then on the right-hand side, in our PHEV category, this is not even a full comprehensive list. I actually had to take some off here, but plenty of options out there. So if you wanted to get into the EV game, but are not willing to take that full leap quite yet, you've got that as well. And then kind of bottom center here is notable vehicles coming. For those of you that answered that you were waiting for pickup trucks or SUVs, your answer is coming. So it's the Ford F-150, and then Chevy as well has a model coming out. And then two other popular manufacturers, Jeep and Subaru for here in Colorado. They'll have an offering come to the market. And then you have people like Rivian and Tesla, who are just pure electric vehicle manufacturers that are starting to get into the truck and SUV game as well. Here locally, we do have a lot of this available. So Nissan, I think, just sold out of the remainder of their 2021 models, but they are going to be bringing some 2022s on board. Durango Motors has Kia. They can also help you order a Mustang Mach-E if that's what you're looking for. And then Morehart Murphy also has Chevy Bolt as well as Hyundai Sonata available. So we do have stuff that's locally available here if that's what you're looking for. So Emily, if you wanted to bump to the next slide here. So we talk about affordability with this. Some of these are expensive, and eventually an electric vehicle will cost less than its gasoline counterpart, just because there's less parts there. Right now they are a little bit expensive, but there's tax incentives out there to help pay for this. So we've got both a federal tax credit and a state. And it is important to note that these are tax credits and not just a rebate that comes back. In the case of the federal tax credit, it's governed by the size of the battery. So if you're into a full battery electric vehicle, chances are you're going to max out that rebate and get the full 7,500. But if you're looking at a plug-in hybrid electric, it is worth just kind of checking out with the manufacturer to make sure what kind of tax incentive that you are going to expect come tax time. And then on the state incentive side of things, it's a little bit different. So they calculate this based on the price difference between an electric vehicle and its gasoline counterpart, and that's kind of how the max incentive works. So again, if you're going to purchase a vehicle like this, the dealership should be able to help you out with calculating where this is going to land. But you can do a little bit of a homework on your own and figure out exactly what to expect come tax time. And then LPEA has a program here as well. I think a lot of people are probably familiar with this, but we offer free level 2 chargers. So it's a charge point charger, and a big requirement on our program is that you own an electric vehicle currently. But if you don't have one yet, we do advocate, if you're doing electrical work, if you're doing a new construction build, is to get that circuit in and get the receptacle built in. And you can see over on the right-hand side exactly what that takes. At its most simple, it's just a 50 amp circuit, some wiring and conduit, and then that receptacle. In the center there, you can see the charge point chargers that we provide. One thing to keep in mind, you can see that 12 inches from the outlet to the actual charger. That's by code, so just keep that in mind when you're placing your receptacle there. The extension cord on that out to the vehicle is 26 feet long, so it will go a ways, but just kind of keep that in mind. The incentives on these, so we do provide, if you take a level 2 charger from LPEA, we'll provide up to 50% or a maximum of $500 for the parts and labor to have that outlet installed. The charger is free to you. You own it from there on. All we ask is that you keep it connected to Wi-Fi and have an active connection in the charge point program, which is pretty simple. Once it's set up, it kind of runs itself. And then if you don't want a charge point charger, if you're bringing, say, your Tesla charger with you or another product, we'll still give you a rebate on that. And we'll give you up to $250 or 50% just for the charger portion. And then again, another $250 or 50% of the installation and labor costs to have that outlet installed. So 2 options there, whether you take one from us or you bring your own charger, there are incentives available. So, as you're planning that stuff out, get in contact with us. And then, Emily, do you want me to pick up this as well?
I got it. Thanks,
Okay.
John. Yeah, thanks so much, John. So, just as we're talking about the cost of the vehicles and the different rebates that we have available, we just wanted to show 2 kind of similar cars, and the Hyundai Sonata. Hyundai is also, these are available here in our community. Just showing that, yes, there is a higher sticker price to look at, but it's good to keep in mind both the incentives that play a big role in that, as well as the ongoing cost of ownership. It's a lot cheaper in average maintenance, as well as fuel costs too, especially if you're able to charge on our off-peak rates or take advantage of LPEA's time of use rate. There's a lot of opportunity to save money over time. It really isn't just a philosophical choice to drive an EV anymore. There's a lot of really great financial incentives and lower costs to consider as well. Great, I'll go ahead and turn this over to Dominic.
Sure, do you want to go to the next slide here?
My slide transition time is not so responsive.
Well, start talking. I think my slides going to show some public charging. Oh, okay, it's battery cells. Got it. Yeah, so I guess I can briefly speak to battery size here. Yeah, so batteries are basically the most expensive piece of any electric vehicle. They are a lot of what you see in that price tag. You'll see will correspond to range in most cases, unless you're buying like a high performance vehicle. The SUVs obviously do a bump. Typically what you're looking at, you can kind of see the statistics in here, that average miles per kWh right now is a little bit weighted towards the fact that most vehicles being bought as EVs are sedans in that model. I think that's going to verge a little closer to 3 probably as we see more and more SUVs and trucks get on the road. In terms of so when you look at that and you're seeing the kWh on a battery, you'll see that the newer Leafs or whatnot have a 60 kWh battery. You'll see the F-150s, I believe, are coming out with an 80 kWh battery, as the Rivians also have. The more expensive Teslas with the long range can go up to 100 kWh battery. And they have their extreme Model S that costs $200,000 and gets 600 miles of range, that has, I think, a 150 something, 170. So at any rate, the more what you'll see in there is a range between about 60 to 80 for the newer vehicles that are going to be the really effective, the 200 plus, the 250 mile range vehicles. And that mileage corresponds, and then the charge times are going to be the important thing there. You'll see that chargers charge at different rates, and knowing your battery size as it relates to the charge speeds is going to be an equation you'll definitely grow familiar with once you get an EV. Could you move to the next slide? Great. Did you also want me to speak to this? Okay. Yeah. So we'd already covered a little bit on how much it costs to run an EV. With the LPEA's rates here, though, how much it costs in terms of just the electricity. This is only that. It's not the fact that there, as John mentioned, there are very few moving parts. You don't have an engine. You don't have the transmission. You're missing. There's a factor fewer parts. There's no oil. So there's things that very commonly, very few fluids in an EV. Aside from that, though, just the electricity itself, you'll see that we have kind of a couple different rates that can help incentivize, especially along with our home program, to run an EV. I think you saw that cited earlier, the how much it costs to actually drive an EV per gallon. Right now, a ballpark you're looking at is basically using these time of use rates, about $5 to go about 240 miles overnight. And that's how you can get that cheap, is basically you're using one of our free chargers that connects to your Wi-Fi and then allows you to schedule the charging around it. So we will, this time of use is something we'll offer to any member, and they can sign up for it, and then they'll get a higher rate during the peak times, which is an 8-hour window that we have in the evenings and early in the morning. And they'll get a low rate, as you can see here, when it says off peak, they'll get basically half price. And we'll then time their charger to come on during the off-peak time at night. And our chargers are large enough that they can actually fill up a car overnight. So by the time it hits that peak in the morning, we turn off the charger and you end up basically getting half price electricity to fill your car. So I'm not going to read you the numbers on here, but that's the equation that comes out most advantageous to one of our members. Go ahead on the next slide.
I think I've got these, Dominic.
I've got it. Great.
All right. Yeah. Hello. Once again, I'm Dan Harms, and I want to cover some of the different types of chargers that you might see here. And I realize we may have jumped the gun a little bit on some of our previous slides where we've been talking about level 2 and level 2 chargers, and you may not have known what that lingo meant. Well, here's a little bit of a graphic that might help you with that. Sometimes you'll hear of basically 3 different types of chargers that you might come across: level 1, level 2, and level 3. Real creative names there. So basically, level 1 means you're plugging your car into an outlet in the wall, just like you would a toaster or any other appliance in your house. So a very versatile cord, but you aren't going to get a really huge charge rate out of that. And by charge rate, I mean, how many kilowatt hours can you replenish back into that battery in a given amount of time. And for a level 1 charger, you'll see that bottom portion there that says, for every hour of charging, you're putting about 3 to 5 miles into your vehicle. So not very much, but enough to get you by if you were staying at a friend's house and needed to top your car off. Now, with what most people are going to be using, I would say, especially at their house, is going to be what we call a level 2 charger. John mentioned the rebates that we have for these, and we're handing these out. These can range in size, but it's very typical to have something 7 to 10 kilowatts. And what that means is that you can now put 10 to 20 miles of range into your vehicle for every hour that you're charging it. So for our typical commute to work, that might be 10 miles, back and forth, maybe you're 20 miles, even 30, 40 miles in a day. So you're talking probably with a level 2 charger, 2 to 3 hours, and you're going to have your car fairly charged. Now, generally batteries, as they reach 100% of a charge level, just like you would your cell phone, it usually takes a little bit longer to put that last bit of charge into it. But, still going to definitely be able to charge your car fully overnight with a level 2 charger. Then the other type of charger, and I want to back up and say level 1 and level 2 are both AC chargers. That's alternating current. That's the type of power you'd get out of your outlet. You're relying on an onboard charging system within your car to convert that AC electric to DC when you're using level 1 or level 2. Now the level 3, that's a little different. Now we're talking DC fast charging. That's filling your car with a fire hose. And so you're putting the DC energy straight into your car. And you might be saying, well, why doesn't everybody just put a level 3 charger out there? Well, it's priced. Level 3 chargers are very expensive. A level 2 charger might be $500 to $700, whereas a level 3 charger could be $50,000. So huge, huge difference on the type of the cost of the charger there. So when we talk about this paradigm shift on how and when we fuel our cars, we're so accustomed to thinking, okay, when I'm low on fuel, I go to the gas station. Well, think about a life now where instead of ever needing to go to the gas station again for 99% of your driving, you're basically coming home, you're plugging in, you're going to work, and you're coming back home and you might be plugging in again. You could probably go several days without recharging your car, but the typical user might just make sure they're topped off every night. And you're never having to stop by the gas station. You're just, basically filling your car at home, so to speak. Next slide, please, Emily. So we're going to have a very similar graphic here, but now we're going to talk about the use cases for each one of these different types of chargers. Level 1, I'll say, is boy, I just don't have any other options. That's what I have to do to top my car off. That's the emergency almost. Level 2, most of our needs are going to be met. Like I said, there's no reason to have a level 3 charger at home because you're going to be there all night. When you're going to be at a place for a significant period of time, a level 3 charger is going to be overkill. And why would you want to pay more to charge your vehicles? Because it's going to cost more to charge with a level 3 charger because of the cost of the charger itself. When if you're staying in a hotel, probably doesn't matter if they have a level 3 charger. If they have level 2, if you're going to be staying there all night, that's going to work just fine. Whereas if you're just stopping at a convenience store, let's say now you're on a road trip and you're low on fuel, you need to refuel and get on the road quickly. That's the purpose of the level 3 charger. Most everyday charging from people is going to be at home by level 2 chargers. But level 3 is there for being on the road. Within 20 to 30 minutes, you're going to get the majority of the charge back into the car, be up and going. And so for a typical stop, pit stop, grab some lunch, level 3 charger is going to get your car back on the road and going. So I think that's most of what I had to say there. I guess I'll touch real briefly on workplace charging. We're envisioning a future where many workplaces are going to have chargers. And when you're going to be at work for up to 4 to 8 hours, then level 2 is going to be the right solution there. You're likely not going to need DC fast chargers for workplace charging, unless you might have a fleet of vehicles that, maybe like our line trucks at La Plata Electric that are coming and going all the time. We might need to have them come in, fill quickly, and be back on the road again. But for your passenger car, like you're showing up to work for your personal vehicle, level 2 is going to be great. So time and place for each charging technology. And that's what I wanted to share there.
Nice. I think I can speak to this one. Yeah, so this is just touching on the public charging that's available right now within our territory. As Dan mentioned, the level 3 use case is a little different, so I will kind of point those out a little separately. The big thing being there that those really are for that corridor charging case. Right now, we've got about 24 public level 2 chargers, a disproportionate number of which are clustered at the Smiley building, but we do have them in many other locations as well. So right now, just for a couple examples, those are at Mercy Medical, Fort Lewis College, Durango Transit Center. The Centennial Park in Pagosa has both the level 2 as well as the fast charger. And there's other locations as well. You can see them here. This is taken from PlugShare. I believe that's just a very common app that people use to find the charge stations. The publicly available level 2s right now have a wide variety of kind of pricing mechanisms on them. Some of those are free. Some of those charge a rate that ends up being somewhere between $5 and $10 for a full fill in most cases of your car, what would be the equivalent of filling your tank. In many of those cases, they are being used for top-ups. We do track the usage on those. And in a lot of cases, they're people coming downtown, parking places like the transit center, and then coming back in a few hours. There's when you'll see on it, some of those are actually like the transit center, which is a little unique, has $1.50 an hour. It's basically a pricing charge or parking charge, sorry. And it's not all that much more expensive than just using meter parking, but you do get charging from it as well. So, and then there's others that are free, and more of those I think will start charging, though they will always be significantly cheaper than paying at the pump, where a DC fast charger, because they're pulling that very large demand all at once, they're expensive to operate, and you pay more like $25, $35, potentially all the way up to $35 to fill your tank there. What you're getting is still less these days with $3 gasoline, but somewhat equivalent, closer to filling your tank at the gas station. And that's all about what Dan was just talking about. You use that on road trips, and the rest of the time you're buying gas for pennies for the gallon. And so when you look at this map, the key part of getting these chargers dispersed is making sure that there's coverage everywhere you need to be, that you don't find people stranded. We've got 3 new DC fast chargers going in. There's been one in Pagosa for some time. Now there's going to be 2 at the Durango Transit Center that are actually live now as of Monday. And there's going to be a new one going in up at Purgatory, up north there, which will be live in about 2 weeks. Those I think will really help in the case of the tourism and the people who are traveling and really need to stop somewhere, coming through the 3 back-to-back mountain passes from Ouray. Having that Purgatory station can really help with some range anxiety, and that's an example of how those corridor chargers would get you to the next step, similar with Pagosa and Wolf Creek. So we try to help the local organizations install these both through rebates, and we also help them out with the grant applications. We've kind of won some of those before, and we'll just assist at a high level there. We'll also track the use on these. And over time, we're going to try to ensure that we have sufficient EV charging as EV adoption grows, and the tourism and our local travel both require it more and more, and just the presence of workplace charging, as Dan mentioned. So that's something that, along with the city of Durango and others, will be collaborating on to ensure that we keep up with this and make sure this penetration is sufficient for our territory. But I think those new DC fast chargers really do connect the dots a bit for where we serve right now. Yeah, so now that dovetails well into the EV Readiness Plan, which is actually now online. If you go out to if you want to Google City of Durango or LPEA EV Readiness Plan, it'll be your first hit on there on the city website. You can get a link to that as well. But that was put together and with collaboration from a bunch of different community stakeholders from different sectors, including water and tourism, the building area, car dealerships, hotels. We had a survey that went out to the public with over 300 respondents that also went into developing that. And some of the key things that are driving us with EVs that came out of that are fleet conversion, which the city and LPEA have both decided as part of our lead by example goal, that we're going to entirely convert LPEA's existing fleet to EVs. The light duty fleet, the goal is 2030. It may extend a little bit past that just with the rolling vehicle stock, but we will basically commit to buying only EVs insofar as an equivalent vehicle exists from here forward. And this already touches on some of the infrastructure that we've put in, and the public adoption is ongoing. The update on that school bus at the bottom, 9R, and La Plata Electric have collaborated on getting an electric school bus with a vehicle-to-grid charger, which is something that will be a little bit unique to most of the state, actually. And that refers to a charging situation where we're actually pulling energy back from the battery onto the grid. It's fairly advanced and really doesn't exist much in the normal consumer cars today. But all these things are, you're going to see more and more of coming both from City of Durango. So we're doing similar eBus project now in collaboration with Pagosa and the City of Durango as well, to hopefully establish a route between the two. We get the grant for that, but you'll continue to see things within all these areas that came largely out of that EV Readiness Plan, many of which we're already kind of doing, but we're going to try to tie it all back to that and figure out what we really need to double down on and what's already going on, just to make sure we're tracking against that. You can go to the next slide. It looks like we got another poll question. So I guess we're Drew. Is that are you the one throwing these up there?
Yeah, we can do that. All right. You should all see the next question. Yep, looks like they're rolling in.
And I guess if you do other, you might just have to raise your hand or email Hillary. That's the current. And that's hknox@lpea.coop. If you didn't have Hillary's email, I'll give it out liberally.
Thanks, Dominic.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I've already gotten like 5 or 6 questions to my email, which is great. And we have 3 people with their hands raised. So we'll get to you guys. We'll just have a few more slides and then we'll get to the Q&A. All right, so it looks like Emily is having some technical difficulties today. So I'm going to go ahead and step in. It looks like we've got a good percentage of you guys who voted on this. And it looks like there's a lot of you would like to see us build more public charging in our rural and rec areas, which is great. And another chunk wanting us to do rebates for EVs. And that's definitely things that we are doing and that we are looking at doing. Just in case you guys are not aware, we do offer free level 2 chargers to any LPEA members. That's a $500 to $7 value. All you have to do is own an EV. So if you want more details about that, give us a call. So Drew, let's go ahead and end the polling. I guess I can do that. Thank you guys for your feedback. All right, and then, see, I don't think that I can actually advance the slides, Drew. I'm not sure if you can, but I believe the next section, we were gonna welcome one of our guest speaker, Sarah Kelly, and she was going to be kind of giving us a taste of what a day in the life of someone with an EV is. So Sarah, I'll hand it over to you.
Okay, hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great, okay. Well, yeah, I got my first EV as soon as one became available in my price range, and that was a Nissan Leaf that I bought in 2017. And at that time, I was commuting from in-town Durango out to Three Springs. And I was able to get by on just plugging into a regular outlet at home in my garage. For that was a little less than a 20-mile round trip. And I still do not have a level 2 home charger in my house today, just because I've gotten used to during the day, I usually don't travel more than 12 miles. And it's easy for me just to plug into a regular outlet at home and charge overnight. When I do need a charger, I'm lucky to live within a mile of one. The transit center, I can walk over there and plug in the car. Like if I know I'm gonna go for a long drive or go on a trip the next day, I can top it up at any of a couple of public chargers, level 2s, that I enjoy using. So those are really valuable to have around town. I'm very excited to hear that the level 3 is working at the transit center, because one thing that you do think about, especially with an EV that doesn't have a long range, like the Leaf, it only had like 130 miles of range, is what would happen if my battery was low and there was an emergency and I had to drive to Grand Junction or I had to get to Cortez or something like that. So when you have level 3s in town that are available, you know that you can buzz over to a level 3 at any time and fill up your tank and be able to get, you know, at least to the maximum extent of your range. So that's really exciting. And I'm hoping to see more of those in town. I know they're expensive, but they're worth it. let me see. So yeah, I would do my commute out to Three Springs, and occasionally I would have to drive from my office in Three Springs to Ignacio. And so if that ever caught me by surprise, if somebody said, hey, can you come out to Ignacio this afternoon or something like that, I was able to just move my car over to the Mercy Hospital parking lot, and they had level 2 chargers there, and I could easily, within an hour or two, get enough juice that I could get out to Ignacio and back home if I needed to. So I was really using this kind of mix of just plugging in overnight that met 80% of my needs, and then using a level 2 when I wanted to go a little farther, or like, take a weekend trip or something. And also to do that, I really didn't even plug in every night. I would plug in like every second or third night. Whew, that was some thunder. I don't know how many of you heard that.
Oh, we've got it here too, for sure.
Yeah, so that was kind of my way of life at that time. And I would say, so yeah, you have to think about it a little bit, but the thing that I appreciated the most that made a much bigger difference than I ever would have imagined is never having to stop at a gas station. It is just so convenient to never have to be like, oh, I'm down to my last drop of gas, and now I've got to, find a gas station. And oh, there's a line at this one. Should I try the next one down the road? You just never have to deal with that. And that's really nice to always wake up with the fuel that you need at your house if you are able to charge at your home. So that was a huge benefit that I didn't realize how wonderful that would be. Gas stations are stinky, they're unpleasant, they're, there's just a lot of reasons that I realize I do not miss stopping at a gas station, and I do not miss having to spend any of my personal time hanging out at the Grease Monkey getting oil changes. There really is very little maintenance that needs to be done on an EV.
Awesome. And Sarah, I'm so sorry to cut you off, but like we've just been kind of going a little long, and there's a lot of questions, and I really want to make sure we have a chance. So I think maybe if other people have questions for you specifically, we can have you address those in the Q&A. But thank you very much.
You bet.
So Emily is able to do one thing with her computer, which is advance the slides. So Dan, I think you've got the last two. If you could just kind of run through these real quick, and then we can get to the Q&A.
Yeah, we'll go through these here pretty quick. We talked about the range that an electric vehicle could have. This green outer perimeter shows a typical range of an electric vehicle. And what we wanted to demonstrate was, okay, what does it take to get to Denver on an electric vehicle? I know, plenty of the enthusiasts here with electric vehicles have done and taken this trip, and it's becoming easier and easier all the time. We have a fast charger in Pagosa. There's fast chargers popping up all along this route. And it used to be that maybe you had to consider a different route to go to Denver just to make sure that you could hit a fast charger somewhere along the way if you didn't want to hang out for a long time. Maybe it was quicker to go a route that had a fast charger than it was the more direct route but didn't have a fast charger. But now luckily there's so many fast chargers that are sitting around out there that they're just making the life pretty easy traveling through Colorado. Now going south and west of us right now, like through New Mexico, they're still catching up on getting enough DC fast chargers there, but we definitely are getting Durango or the Colorado area covered pretty quickly. There is this pro tip here that there's an app called in a trip planner called PlugShare that can help you, and it takes elevations into consideration because you might be worried going over Wolf Creek, I'm running out of battery capacity, but then on your way down, maybe you're recharging some more. And Emily, if you could tap that one more time, I was just going to show all the level 3 chargers that are within Colorado right now. They're really filling the map up very nicely, both with the corridor plan and everything. So I think that's where I'm going to sort of cut that off right now so we can get to some questions and go from there.
So awesome. Thanks to everyone, and thanks to you guys for your patience. We are going to get to the Q&A. We went a little longer than we hoped, but we should be able to get to a decent amount of your questions. So just as a reminder, you have 2 options for asking questions. You can either raise your hand and I'll unmute you and you can verbally ask your question. If you're on a computer, you just raise your hand by hitting the raise your hand button at the bottom of your Zoom console. If you're only on your phone, you can raise your hand by hitting *9. The other option is to shoot me an email at hknox@lpea.coop, and we'll read your question aloud. If we don't get to it tonight on this call, we'll get back to you within the next day or so. So let's go ahead and get kicked off here. We'll start with one of the first questions we got in. I think, Dan, this one's going to be for you. Where does our power come from that would power the electricity that charges my car? I.e., does it come from coal? Do you want to talk about our power mix, Dan?
Sure, I'll take a swing at that one. I'm sure many people on this call are aware of, we're working diligently on power supply options as we speak today. Right now, 95% of our power does come from tri-state. That does not mean it's all coal, but there is a substantial amount of coal still there. Approximately 35% of the power that we deliver to homes today are renewable, is a carbon-free power source. About 50% comes from coal and the remaining from natural gas. That is changing all the time. Their tri-state has their responsible energy plan that they're working to eliminate virtually all coal within the state of Colorado by 2030. And as you saw with our goal, we're trying to cut our carbon emissions by half. But even with the power supply that we have today with coal and natural gas, both in the power supply mix, that still creates less of a carbon footprint than it would be with just burning gasoline in your vehicle today.
Great, thanks, Dan. So let's go ahead and go to the raised hands. I'm going to go ahead and unmute Nancy Fisher. So Nancy, please go ahead, and it looks like you're on mute. So if you want to unmute yourself and ask your question, go ahead. Okay, Nancy, you sound a little bit like Minnie Mouse. We can't hear you. You might want to try email instead or fiddle around with your audio settings, but we'll try coming back to you. Let's give the floor to, I'm just not sure if it's Dana or Dana Manganaro. So looks like you're on mute if you want to unmute and ask your question.
Actually, I sent you both of my questions in email and you've covered one of them, but the other one was about, see, that's why I write these things down.
Oh, I think I've got it. You want to say it or should I?
You please say it.
Okay, how are you now handling places that have power to sell back to the grid? And are you now able to store it for times when the sun is down?
Yes, that's it.
Thank you.
Dominic, why don't you take a swing at that one and I'll fill in any gaps.
Yeah, sure. I think I heard the first part of that. Did you say sell back to the grid, Hillary?
Yes, it said, how are you now handling places that have power to sell back, give back to the grid? And are you now able to store it for times when the sun is down?
Yeah, so yeah, that does speak to a little bit of what I touched on with that vehicle to grid project that we're doing with 9R School District and their e-bus. That will have the capability for us to pull power back onto the grid during peak times. Very few other vehicles do at this time. That's kind of a future state that we will be working towards. So right now, when it comes to storing it, what we do with that instead is basically timing it. It's saying when we have excess energy during the middle of the day or late at night when there's excess versus those peak times when energy is expensive and the dirtiest because all the gas peakers have spun to life. We then fill up your car during those times instead. So that's what we're doing with those home chargers today, is avoiding the peak with it. That vehicle to grid goes the next step to where you're not only avoiding by timing when we charge the school bus, but during the time we need the energy, we're actually taking energy back from the school bus to the grid. So we will be doing that shortly, but it's kind of in its infancy in terms of a technology. Very few vehicles allow for it today. So we're just kind of piloting that now.
So I was thinking about schools and businesses that have solar panels on their buildings that have excess energy. So that certainly answers the question about vehicles. But I was thinking about, places like schools that have excess power that they can't use. So that was my curiosity, but maybe that's the same thing applies to those buildings.
Yeah, ideally, I mean, they could have a situation where they dump that into their fleet if it's present when they're generating excess energy. that would be the behind the meter kind of thing they could do.
Got it. Great.
All right, so now I'm going to go ahead and unmute Thomas and Diane Higgins. So looks like you're ready to go.
I think you actually brought Kirsten over. There we go.
See, Thomas and Diane Higgins, looks like you're muted. Can you unmute yourself? Okay. I'm going to let you try and figure that out. And I will now go ahead and allow Kirsten Skihan, who's one of our board members, to ask a question. Kirsten, you're on mute as well.
Yeah, I didn't realize I had my hand up. Sorry.
Oh.
But I'll ask a question, or I'll make a point if I may. You know, California recently did a study of folks who chose not to rebuy or to purchase their second car as an electric vehicle, and mostly the reason why was if they didn't have an at-home charger. So I think the fact that you guys provide the at-home charger for folks is super, because that makes it so convenient for people, and the convenience is what really keeps people happy. So I really appreciate that LPEA does that. So no question though.
All right, great. Thanks, Kirsten. I did get another question in that I think can go to you, Dan. It's a question on, would you address the issue of different cars needing a different or specific level 3 charger, i.e. not all chargers charging all cars?
Yeah, I'll hit that to a little bit of knowledge. I might pass it on to Dominic on the different plug types, because different cars, some take different plug types. There's 2 standard ones out there. But one of the big primary differences is the difference between a Tesla charging system and something that's not Tesla. It's sort of like, look at Tesla sort of as the Apple and everybody else as the PC. You know, it's sort of Tesla is proprietary, and you can charge Tesla vehicles at Tesla chargers. Now, I've seen some news releases lately that might alter and change that around right now, coming here pretty soon. So keep your eye open for that. So there might be some adapter or something that you could put on a Tesla charger that would allow you to charge other vehicles that might be coming out there. Dominic, I know there's CHAdeMO and another standardization, or maybe John looked like he was unmuted, could answer that as well.
Yeah. So like you're saying, the CHAdeMO is going to be the standard SAE level 3 charger to a Tesla. So you can take your Tesla around wherever you need to right now. Unfortunately, the reverse does not work. So any of the Tesla superchargers are going to be Tesla vehicles only. But like Dan mentioned, they're thinking about changing that. And I'll give a plug out to the town of Pagosa, who is working on a CHAdeMO conversion cable out there as well. So if you're passing through Pagosa and have a non-Tesla or have a Tesla, don't be afraid to stop in at their DC fast charger out there as well.
Great. I have one quick one that I can actually answer, which never happens. It's partially tangentially related. Someone wanted to know if we have rebates for electric bikes, and we do. So we will, if you buy a new electric bike, we will rebate you 25% of that bike, but only up to $150. So that is a rebate that we have available. We have a question actually for Sarah. So Sarah, one of our participants wanted to know if you've done a long trip with your electric vehicle, and how easy or hard was it to find a charging station when you were doing so?
Sure. Yes, I had upgraded from my 130-mile Nissan to a 230-mile Bolt a couple years back, and I drove it. My longest trip was my husband and I drove to the top of the mitten of Michigan from here in Durango. And we had no trouble finding charging stops all along that route. due to the Electrify America program that has installed DC fast chargers all along the interstates. It does take longer and you need to be patient, especially with the Chevy Bolt. If you are interested in doing long road trips, check on what the DC fast charge rate of your car is. The Bolt is a little slower. The new Mustang coming out is going to be about 50% faster than the Bolt. So it takes you from having to wait. In the Bolt, we would often have to wait an hour to go from 20 to 80%. And the Mustang, it would be more like 35, 45 minutes. So it does add some onto your trip. However, with the Bolt, I've also driven to Flagstaff, Arizona. I've driven to Albuquerque, of course, Grand Junction and Denver. And especially with the fast charging as it is now, it's quite easy. One more question that I'll answer that wasn't asked is people often worry about, what do you do if you show up at the fast charger and all of the plugs are taken? You know, you just have to wait. And it's true that if they were all taken, you would have to wait. But of the probably 20 or 30 fast charge stops that I've made on these long distance trips, only once have I ever even seen another EV at the station. So right now, it's just not a problem. You won't end up waiting to fast charge when you arrive.
Great. Thank you, Sarah. Let's go ahead. Doug Carlson, you have your hand raised. I'm going to allow you to speak. So please unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hi. Yeah, one of the big competitive differences between Tesla and everybody else is, and I don't know if it's true or not, but the rumor is that the Tesla stations are much more reliable than all the other ones. So my question is who's responsible for keeping all these charge stations up and running? And is there any truth to the fact that the charge port stations quite often charge a lot slower than advertised or don't work at all?
Great question, Doug. Who wants to take that one?
I can take a crack at that. So with the DC fast chargers specifically, there's a license agreement with these are through the corridor charge program that's part of the VW settlement. So all of those, the Pagosa, the Transit Center, and the Purgatory Charger all went in as a part of that same agreement. So the hosts actually own those stations. In this case, City of Durango owns their station, City of Pagosa owns theirs, and Purgatory Resort owns that station. They have a 7-year free basically service warranty where those things will automatically alert somebody when it goes down, and they will send a local dispatch with a guaranteed 24-hour response. Those corridor situations like that are pretty heavily kind of regulated like that because of that issue. They've seen this in other places. When you just get a private host, so for example, not to throw anybody on the bus, but so at our station, say our station out in our parking lot breaks, we are under no obligation to fix it. It could sit there broken for weeks. We could fix it right away. So, but the DC fast chargers that we are putting in and that we're collaborating on, that's definitely something we're cognizant of, and we're not going to be working together with these pretty heavily. We certainly have been deep into the installation of these. When we don't have a plan to keep them maintained, they're just simply too expensive. You know, we're talking about $350,000 projects. The one at the Transit Center has 2 DC fast chargers. So if one was ever taken, you have a backup.
I'm on mute. Let's see. So I'm going to go back to one of the emailed questions. This one's a tricky one. We'll see who wants to take this one. I have an 8.28 kilowatt roof solar system on my house. What kind of power draw does an EV take daily from my generation?
I'll give a crack
I
at
could
it.
kind of redeem my.
You have on it. Yeah, go for it.
I was going to try to
expert,
redeem myself now that I've got tech back in action a little bit. My apologies, everyone. Yeah, technical difficulties always fun. So I saw that question come through a little earlier, so I ran a little bit of calculations for you. Like we were talking about before, a typical kind of average EV is about 3 miles per kilowatt hour. So if you drive an average of about 10,000 kilowatt hours in a year, means your EV's going to pull about 3,000 to 3,500 kilowatt hours in a year. Again, a lot of this has to do with your charging habits, how much you're charging and how much you're driving. But if you charge primarily at home and drive about 10,000 miles per year, that will use about 3,000 to 3,500 kilowatt hours per year, which your 8 kW PV system will produce about 13,500 kilowatt hours per year. So about 20 to 25% of your PV production would be used by your EV. Dan, I saw you kind of chime in there too at the end. Is that about jive with your calculations as well? Great.
And I'll add, I think what we were seeing, Dominic had run some numbers, about 6.5 kW was our average charge rate on a charger. And then, we keep talking about shifting the paradigm a little bit. It's not that you're draining a battery completely every day. They're just little top offs every single night. So it is just kind of little bits that you're taking from that. So it's not as though you're taking a whole 80 kWh battery and having to fill that up each night.
Awesome. So it looks like Thomas and Diane Higgins are unmuted. Do you guys want to go ahead and try again to ask your question? Okay, I think they're still having some audio difficulties. Please do feel free to email us though, and we'd be more than happy to get back to you. Let's see, we've got Patricia Carey. So I'm going to go ahead and allow you to talk. Please unmute yourself and ask your question.
Yes, good evening, everyone. Let me just turn, hang on. I'm hearing a lot of background noise, I'm not sure.
Yeah. Let's see. I think we're getting some echo on. I'm not sure if you've got your device or this open on 2 different devices, but we're definitely getting some Mars echo there. Maybe easier for you to send us an email if that's possible. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and unmute Christopher Martin and allow you to ask your question. Please unmute yourself and let us know.
Yeah, I have a question on the smaller rebate for the independent charger, the why behind that. Because I was just thinking that you may have LP customers that are competing and selling level 2 charging stations so anyway, what's the logic behind that, the smaller rebate? And I want to ask a follow-up question on the technology for the microgrid unit, but go ahead, please.
Yeah, I can speak to that. So it is still $500. So whether you take a charger from us or bring your own, it is still $500 total. We just end up splitting that to cover a portion of the charger cost and then a portion of the installation cost. And what we're seeing is that in most cases that rebate like that does max out. So you're getting somewhere near or at $500. Then you had a follow-up question as well.
Well, the follow-up question, turn off my phone here. My follow-up question had to be, any of these charging stations, do you like the technology behind monitoring the grid? In other words, if you guys are about ready to hit a peak, you want to have the microgrid charging station because it's giving you feedback and you might throttle those stations down. Or where's how do you differentiate the software versus the hardware, and how important is it to you guys?
Dominic, you want to have a crack at that one?
Yeah, sure. I'd love to speak to that. Yeah, so we actually do exactly what you're saying. Basically, the fleet of our home chargers that we're putting out there are Wi-Fi connected, so they're IoT devices. Right now, we will be managing those. We do manage those through the ChargePoint built-in interface. That's the brand chargers we give out. We're working on a DR platform, demand response platform, by which we'll integrate not only the ChargePoint chargers, but many other devices, including water heaters, smart thermostats, all sorts of things in the future. And the goal for that is to do what you're talking about, basically be grid responsive in a single location It's also going to be our situational awareness platform. So it's going to be actively monitoring at the meter level, the substation level, and we'll be reacting when we see overproduction of solar, for example, or any number of other things. But short, I guess that's a long way to say yes. We're definitely wanting to do. We're deeply interested in that, and we're kind of doing it today, and we're iterating towards a more and more advanced version.
Great. So I recognize we're 7 minutes over time. I'd like to answer just a few more questions, just because our presentation did run long. But I will say to the folks that need to go, all of you will be getting an email either tomorrow or the next day with links to this. And anyone who emailed me your questions, we will get back to you with a personal response as well. So if you need to drop off, you can, but let's try and answer at least a few more questions before we close. We got a question about, I currently rent my home and I'm wondering what the realistic charging options are if the house does not have a level 2 charging station.
Yeah, so you could do the level 1 charging. The other option is those rebates would apply. So if your landlord would be interested in going EV ready, what you can do is basically have them take the rebate to do the plug install and install the 240 socket there in your garage. Then because you have a registered vehicle and you're our customer, we will give you a free EV charger. And in that case, if you move to another place that's ready, you would be able to take that with you. That's one opportunity. Otherwise, there's the level 1 charging, as Sarah mentioned, that's gotten her by for 4.5 years or something like that. So that's another alternative as well. But I think, you know, if you want the level 2, working with your landlord and then taking advantage of our program can work as well.
Okay, we just got a question that I really want to ask too, because I've heard about this with my iPhone. This person wants to know, what effect does charging from half full or nearly empty or nearly full have on battery life, if any? I don't know the answer.
Very, very little. The thing is, very empty does actually harm a battery. So lithium ion batteries, you don't want to completely zero them out. The crystal structure is harmed by that. But short of that, if you're jumping around anywhere between 20 and really 100, because most of these actually do a buffered safety, they're not actually letting you overcharge the battery, it is almost completely negligible. It's like a bucket. You could put in 4, take out 4, do that repeatedly. When it says a battery can cycle 10,000 times, it's not actually, it's referring to roughly a full cycle battery of the charge. So you can do that in any number of increments and it really doesn't care much.
Great. Let's ask one more on the email questions, and then Bryce, you're up next for a question. So let's see. What are the plans from LPEA to help homeowners when the additional EV or other BE measures means an upgrade to the service at the pole is required? For example, when you have to go from 200 to 320 to 400 amp service.
I'll cover a little bit of that. So that would probably fall under our existing line extension policy and a service upgrade. With the load that you're proposing, then it would involve a free service upgrade as long as the load is there. So I would recommend you talk to our engineering secretary. They'd start a job and be able to make sure all the bases are covered there.
Great. Then we have.
I'd also briefly mention that from what we've seen so far, we're not really 200 amp service, at least for most of the vehicles and the chargers that are on, we're handing out, 200 amp service is totally sufficient. And, you know, you might run into some issues with, you know, some of the older homes downtown I've seen have like 70 amp service to the house. So that's a little bit more unique, in which case you might need an upgrade, and you could get into more of this once some of the 80 amp charge service are starting to come online. But just in general, say we haven't had to see many homeowners need to upgrade their service in order to put in an EV charger.
Great. All right, so we're getting to 7:11 here, and I want to be respectful of everyone's evening. So I'm going to allow one more question. And just as a reminder, if you did email me, we will get back to you with your answers tomorrow. But let me go ahead and unmute Bryce Hunt and allow you to ask your question. It looks like you're still on mute.
There you go. Sorry about that. Yeah, just a quick question. One is there any kind of projected industry average lifespan for these batteries? And also, is there an available smart app you can get on your phone, like that'll show you exactly where these charging stations are located? That would be something like on Google Maps, for example. That's it.
I can answer the second part of that, and then I'd be happy to pass it on for the first part. But yeah, there's a handful of different apps. PlugShare in particular is our kind of the first and biggest one. And they, you know, like Dan mentioned before, there's a new feature where you can say, this is where I'm traveling and range of the car and speed of the charger, and really plan out where you're going to go and where you're going to charge. So PlugShare is a common one I would recommend. I'll let someone jump in on the average lifespan of some of the batteries, but I will say there's a lot of discussion in the industry as well about other uses for car batteries when they are not quite up to snuff for driving for vehicles, but they, you know, may be able to be upcycled and used for other applications. And a lot of that is, you know, there's a lot of movement on that in the industry as well.
Yeah, there's a big variance there right now. Basically, you range all the way from the newest generation Tesla batteries that have much better insulation, and that's heat and cooling insulative value in them. And that actually maintains the lifespan of the battery much, much longer. There's studies from a taxi service that goes back and forth between Las Vegas and LA and has put 500,000 miles on many of theirs. And some of those are getting to like 80, 75, 78% in terms of capacity, which is great. But there's other vehicles wherein the battery is not a $40,000 component that have had significantly less, more loss. And so there's a lot of conversation going around that. There's the used market is seeing drop off in value from the things around 150, 200,000 miles. There's a lot of diagnostic questions right now around how do you see what's the health of the battery when I'm going to buy a used EV. And mileage is somewhat dependent on that. But some of the other factors, for example, is if you charge at a DC fast charger every single day and you never charge at level 2 chargers, that's actually going to reduce your battery life because you're hitting it with a much faster charge. So there's some factors like that that are somewhat intangible. But typically people are saying between 200,000 all the way up to 500,000 plus miles is what they're. But really, we're coming into the rubber meets the road era because most of the cars just haven't been around that long. You're talking about a 15-year lifespan is when people are sort of predicting based on average driving, and we're just starting to come up on when batteries may or may not. They haven't gunned it yet, so it looks good for the 150 to 250,000 mile range at least. But.
Great. So I'm going to go ahead and cut off the Q&A there because we are 15 minutes over. But again, if you emailed me, hknox@lpea.coop, we will answer your question and get back to you. And Emily, do you want to wrap us up?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you to my team for picking up and carrying us through. Thank you all for attending this and for your patience with my technical difficulties today. I also really wanted to thank Sarah Kelly, our local OG EV enthusiast here in Durango, for taking the time and sharing your experience and expertise with us. We really have been looking forward to these events, and we're hoping to continue them and hopefully host some more in-person and webinars coming soon. So please keep an eye on your alerts and announcements from LPEA. Thank you guys so much for being here, and have a great evening.
Bye, everyone.